Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Real Estate Podcast. We're real excited about this. We've been planning this for a couple months now, and we hope that you enjoy it as much as we enjoy providing the content. Let me give you an idea of what our expectations and objectives are for this podcast. I'm somebody that, of course, loves talking, so this fits right up my alley. The topics that I'm going to be chatting about during the podcast obviously will be real estate centric, but not solely confined to real estate. When I say real estate centric, there's a lot of different topics in real estate. Probably the most important and publicized one are all the changes that we're going to be experiencing starting in mid-August in the state of Florida and most parts of the country as well, but definitely in the state of Florida. So I will be spending a fair amount of time going over that. I'll give you my understanding and interpretation of the changes. I will also give you my opinion of the changes, the good and bad of it, and just what I feel will be the initial ramifications of the changes. So we'll be highly getting into that. One thing I always ask my listeners is if you have questions about topics that I've brought up, feel free to bring those questions forward. Or if you'd like topics discussed that we haven't discussed, let me know. And if we feel they're germane, we'll certainly try to add them to our content. So the easiest way to communicate with me, any feelings or opinions that you have on what I share on this show would be my email address at marty@floridasells.com. I do check my email continuously as I'm in the real estate business, so communications are utmost, so I'm kind of anal about always checking real estate. So that is the best way to reach me. So let's get started. The first thing I want to mention is give you a little bit of a background of myself, kind of a little historical perspective to give you an idea of who you're going to be sharing your listening time with. I've been in the real estate business over 30 years. I started when I was 8 years old, just joking, LOL. And I love real estate. I've held a variety of functions in real estate. Kind of the interesting thing in my background compared to a lot of other folks is when I first got into real estate, it was a change from what I had been doing before. I had been a partner in a large health and racquetball and social club organization. So I had a lot of sales and what I would call networking and socializing, but nothing that was closely related to real estate. So I transitioned into real estate, but as my personality and patience level are, I wanted to come up with a concept and a strategy that was not currently taking place in the real estate business. So this was basically, 30 plus years ago when all this took place. So I decided to come up with a concept that was not currently being utilized in real estate. And keep in mind that at this point, I had never sold any real estate either. So we actually opened an office. I was in charge of the office, and I came in it with no experience in real estate. So it was learning on the fly along with incorporating a different concept. Basically, my concept at that time was to have a program that would encourage sellers to call me without me having to do a lot of soliciting because I was new in the business and didn't have a network of customers. So we came up with what was referred to as a flat fee concept. So our real estate commissions were a lot lower than folks we were competing with. I printed my own magazine publication, and it was a participative approach in the sense that the customers and myself form more of a marriage, you can say, in that my customers participated significantly in the process along with me. The concept was a great success for a variety of reasons. and I ended up selling that business about 4 or 5 years later. That particular office was located in Kissimmee, Florida, which is just a bedroom community of Orlando. And so my primary business was in Kissimmee, and I also did a fair amount of business in South Orlando as well. So I moved on from that business and ultimately owned and operated a Century 21 office that was located in South Chase, which again is in South Orlando, nearby Hunters Creek, for those of you who know the Hunters Creek area. So that business took off very quickly. The name recognition of Century 21, along with the reputation I'd established for providing skilled, professional, and ethical service, and the networking I had done during the prior 4 or 5 years when I owned my previous office, all led to this office having a tremendous growth spurt. So we did exceedingly well with that, and ultimately I sold that business as well. The reason I sold my business, because everybody asked me at that time, gee, you've got a business that's growing so rapidly, you've got a great market, you've got a great reputation. Why would you want to sell the business? Well, my main reason was my 2 kids were younger. One was just starting school, and one was a toddler. And so I was pulled in a number of different directions. Because the real estate business, I was not only owning it, I was managing it, I was doing the hiring and training, I was a top producer in the area. So it was very labor intensive, and it was a challenge juggling all that along with my family responsibilities. I didn't want to be an absentee or distracted parent. So I thought the best thing for myself, my lifestyle, and my kids was to sell that business. From there, I went to work with a national company called Keller Williams, and I brought a sales team with me. And we did quite well there. I was what's referred to as a mega agent during my time there. That was an office located in the Hunters Creek area, and I was fortunate enough to be the number 1 agent in that office for the time I was there. I also focused a lot of my time and energies at that time on Hunters Creek, and fortunately that's established a platform for me. So I've been fortunate enough to be the number 1 agent in Hunters Creek now for 24 to 25 consecutive years. And so I stayed with Keller Williams for a number of years, and then for my own personal reasons, a lot of them were political in terms of how that office was being run by the owners. I transitioned to my current employer, which is Greater Orlando Realty. So I've been with Greater Orlando now for the better part of over 10 years, and we are also physically located in Hunters Creek. We're owned by a gentleman who's great to work with. His name is Greg Mann. He lets us provide a lot of autonomy, and he's a great guy to work with. The other thing about Greg that makes the office a nice situation is Greg has a very, very successful property management business. And so the property management has enabled him to take a more relaxed approach, because property management done correctly is always a source of tremendous income, as a lot of people in Orlando area own investment property and they need and want a good property manager. And especially now, Orlando, Florida is one of the top 2 destinations in the United States for people moving here from other areas. So there's never a lack of clientele for property management. So that's enabled Greg to not have to focus on profit and putting pressure on his agents, but to grow the office in an organic fashion and making it an enjoyable opportunity for folks like myself to work at. The other thing is we have a lot more input, and we can tailor things to suit our own personal tastes and objectives. And obviously, I've been doing this a long time, So hopefully I have quite a bit of knowledge and don't need a lot of oversight or supervision. I also have a few folks that help me presently. My wife is in real estate, Camille. Those of you may know her because she's heavily involved in the Hunters Creek Running Club. She's a fitness buff. She is heavily into yoga. She tried to open a yoga studio, but it happened during the pandemic, so the timing wasn't right. And she's now currently gotten into the fitness training field as well because she really has a passion not only for staying in good shape, but helping people to get in better shape, extend their life expectancy, minimize their injuries, just maintain better health. She focuses more on people, let's say, that are either above 40 or people that have not stayed in good shape and maybe have weight issues, or they have things that require a lot more personal instruction to not only let them enjoy it, but to make sure that they're not taking any health risk. At the same time, she wanted to do something very affordable for folks because profit for her is not her primary motive. The love of what she does is. So accordingly, she's been able to combine those facets, and it's proven to be very worthwhile for her. As I mentioned earlier, I have 2 children that are living in Orlando. I also have 2 older children from a first marriage that live out in California. My 2 local children, one is a deputy sheriff with Orange County, and he has a passion for trying to improve the quality of life, not only for the local residents, but to help people that commit criminal activity, treat them in a respectful manner, and maybe hopefully get them so they're not as much repeat offenders. Obviously, he has limited control over that. For those of you who know about our penal system, unfortunately, in the United States, it's all focused on punishment and not providing training skills and determining how they can improve people so that when they do get out of jail, their rate of recidivism is low. That's still something hugely lacking in our country. And you probably will hear my opinions on that as well at some point in the future show. I will also talk about the economy, the good and bad, and what I forecast with the economy. And of course, that all has a big impact on real estate. So I think hopefully you'll find these topics interesting and worthwhile. And whether you end up meeting me in person or we end up doing real estate business in the future, hopefully the information and opinions I can impart on you will benefit you in some aspect of your life. Let me share a couple minutes of my personal philosophy. As you maybe can tell from this brief introduction, I tend to have fairly strong opinions, and I do share them to a degree. That's a fine line in the sense that not everybody's going to agree with me, of course, and you don't want to offend people with contrary perspectives. But I think one thing that's happened in this country is people are not truthful on a variety of ways. And not only does that include their opinions of things, but when they give their opinions, either not basing it on fact or distorting the facts. So one of my disappointments in society in the 21st century is a couple things: the lack of integrity, the lack of ethics, the lack of people knowing the facts, the lack of people being serial liars, the lack of people excusing their behavior due to a variety of social factors. There's just a lot of things. We tend to be a society that doesn't want to have frank conversations about what are the problems with the country and how we can improve them without discussing what your political bent is. For example, I'll just use an example that's recent, that's a real pet peeve of mine. The Supreme Court recently got a lot of publicity with their financial disclosures. It's come to pass that some of the justices were less than truthful in their initial their initial disclosure, and had to revise their disclosures. It also came to pass that one of our Supreme Court justices, in particular, Clarence Thomas, had an obscene amount of income and assistance on his financial disclosure from people that are highly political, that cases or concepts he might rule on, and he refuses to admit there's a conflict of interest and refuses to recuse himself from those cases. It's a clear case of a conflict of interest, and quite honestly, it's disgusting. For example, my son, who's a policeman, I'll use him as an example. He's not even supposed to take a free cup of coffee, being a public servant that makes a living wage, but certainly is not wealthy from it. Where the Supreme Court, who makes a much higher wage, and also if they end up retiring or they're allowed to put out memoirs, write books, whatever the case may be, they basically have no oversight or control over them. The Supreme Court is probably the only position in the United States I'm aware of that cannot be fired. They have a lifetime appointment. So that means that they can be as incompetent or dishonest as they choose to be, and there's nothing that can be done about it. There's something intrinsically wrong with that, and then you contrast that to a policeman that can't even get a $3 cup of coffee. Our priorities are way out of whack. And so the Supreme Court, that isn't the only case, but that's the only one I'll talk about today. The Supreme Court's lost complete credibility and admiration from a lot of people, myself included. You pretty much know how they're going to rule on a case when they get it, because it's such a political body, and they're not ruling on the merits of the cases in many times. It's really, it's absurd. I can't say anything more negative about it. It's just a crisis in this country. And you always hear the term about the framers of our Constitution, who were brilliant people back in 1776. I'm sure they didn't envision the Supreme Court running in this fashion. But nonetheless, unless Congress has the wherewithal and the guts and the non-biased nature of amending the Constitution to make the Supreme Court accountable, it's not going to change, and it's definitely gotten significantly worse over the past years. So that's a little bit about my personal philosophy. If you had to summarize, what do I stand for? I stand for ethics. I stand for integrity. I stand for hard work. I stand for professionalism. And I try to impart those traits to my kids and family. I've always told my kids that, real estate is a challenging business. There's a lot of different personalities you work with. But at the end of the day, I want to treat all my customers like I expect to be treated. And basically, I try to treat them like family. I'd rather lose a transaction and not generate income rather than doing something that I know is not correct. So basically, I'd rather not make any money than have to compromise my values to make a transaction. And I think I've successfully done that. I'm sure not everybody loves me because I tend to voice my opinions, but I would be surprised if somebody said I did wrong by them and didn't do what I promised them. So that's kind of my philosophy in a nutshell. As I said, I want to make this show germane. I want to make it beneficial, and I do want to get input from my audience. I also want to give props to my producer and a personal right hand, Shannon Gonzalez. She's been working with me now about 20 years. So we haven't killed each other yet, And, hopefully we'll continue on in our relationship and make it a beneficial relationship. That's all for today. I'm signing off. We will be doing our show every Friday. We'll be doing it at 12 noon to 12:30. If the show gets popular enough, we may increase the number of episodes, but initially we'll be starting with once a week. And we'll also be having live interviews as time goes on. Thanks very much. This is Marty Kaiser signing off. And remember my slogan, live the dream.